How do you think the government should respond to these concerns, allay these concerns, and say, hey, your data is safe with us. We're not going to have any data breaches, not at least, at this scale, because if it does happen, it's gonna be huge.
And I always say, what's the point? Your data is already out there. People have access to it. You have reacted late, too late. Damage has been done.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Headlines, your one-stop for all the top stories that made the headlines and more. I'm Hazween Hassan. Today we discuss the upcoming tabling of the Online Safety Act, or Onsa, set to be presented in Parliament for its first reading soon. Communications Minister Fahmi Fadzil said earlier this week that once Onsa is enforced, social media platforms could face harsh penalties or be brought to court if they fail to remove inappropriate posts following Malaysia's social media licensing requirements that comes into effect starting January 1st next year. Just on Monday, the NST reported the shocking revelation of sexual grooming of minors that went undetected for years. In our exclusive, we found several social media groups that appear to be promoting the sexual grooming of children, followed by thousands of members, often containing sexually overt postings with pictures of children and pre-teens. One such group dates as far back as May 2014, which was created to share and post content of primary school children with 4,600 members. Its profile data showed that it had welcomed, in just the last week, 80 new members. Last Sunday, police said they were investigating allegations of child grooming in a private Facebook group that shared pictures of schoolgirls wearing baju kurung. It is understood that the group had more than 6,100 members. A crime watch group has since questioned how these online groups have been allowed to operate unchecked in the cyberspace for so long. Malaysians Against Rape, Assault and Snatch Theft, or MARA founder Dave Avran says the government needs to haul up these social media platforms and operators so that they can get their act right. He asks, how much longer will our children be exposed to potential monsters online? Now, with the MCMC running its public consultation on its draft Code of Conduct for Internet Messaging and social media service providers, the feedback from the service providers, the public, industry players, and other stakeholders will prove vital in informing authorities on the best way forward with their plans. On Tuesday, I spoke to USM cybersecurity expert, Associate Professor Dr. Selvakumar Manickam, and he shared his thoughts firstly on how this all looks for the government with the recent revelation of the child groomers online, and why and how it's gone undetected for so long, for a decade. And this is what he had to say. Right. Professor Selvakumar, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us on Beyond the Headlines. It's always a pleasure to have you. Now, on the pressing issues, now with the talk of Onsa, the online safety bill being tabled, going to be tabled in Parliament soon, as what the Communications Minister Fahmi Fadzil has said, I think this is more concerning than it is anything else, because you would think that something as big as this would have gotten the attention of authorities a long time ago and wouldn't have to wait for the online safety bill to come. So your comments first on this, Professor.
I think you're right in the sense that social media has been used for many illicit and how should I say, quote unquote, evil purposes. And it used to be where the threat was just limited to cyberspace, right? Now it is now affecting actual life. If you look at it, it is transcending from the cyberspace to the actual physical space that we live in. And especially when it comes to, we have seen incidences of cyber harassment, cyberbullying, hate speech, human trafficking, exploitation, and more commonly, child exploitation and grooming. And you know, it's disturbing. It's basically a disturbing reality, right? There are groups dedicated to sexual grooming of children that exist on social media, and you'll be surprised, and the numbers are quite huge, and they have existed for a long time. You may think that this is something that probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when everybody started using more and more of social media. But the reality is it has been happening for a long, long time. But the problem with that is that uh, social media platforms are not putting too much enough effort into ensuring this kind of content is being filtered, being protected from the minors, from the young uh, children, and so on. And I
Right.
think this is a very, how should I say, multifaceted problem. It's not just social media. Our government has to play a big role. Our
Mm-hmm.
parents have to play a big role. So it's quite complex, but we have to start somewhere where one thing we need to do, at least at the national level, at Malaysian level, we need to invest. We need to invest in resources, in expertise, in technologies. You can bring in things like AI and data analytics to support and find out
Mm-hmm.
this kind of activity that is happening on social media.
Um, is it alarming now that, it's for me at least the way I see it, because I report the news, it's gone from bad to worse. When we initially we had when we started discussing about the online safety bill, it was on the back of the death of a TikToker, famous influencer on TikTok, Esha, right? And as
Yeah,
unfortunate as that was, tragic, it sort of stemmed from cyberbullying. And then now with our front page news yesterday, it seems like there's just a lot more to be unraveled, unfortunately. Um,
sure.
so is this online safety bill something to put an end to this once and for all, or is it just really sort of damage control kind of PR, to for not to get the crisis get further worse? What is it? How do you see it now?
Okay, I think this problem is not confined to just Malaysia. It's a
Mm,
global problem, and the social media companies are very powerful. We never had regulation to monitor, control, and dictate what we want in Malaysia. And the problem is not just Malaysia. These companies are U.S. companies, right? And
mm,
even in U.S., they are extremely powerful. I think early this year, the Senate Judiciary Committee of the U.S. Called all the social media bosses and drilled them and grilled them, and uh, and a lot of them could not provide an answer. Right? They looked at how online child sexual exploitation, grooming, and so on has been going on.
mm,
The outcome of that was social media companies have failed to pretty much police themselves at the expense of the young children, right? And even themselves, even during the hearing, one of the Senate member called Mark Zuckerberg cyber pimp,
mhm.
right?
Right.
So it is a problem that we see that is happening that is not solvable even at the home country of these companies. And it's going to be challenging to do that in Malaysia. But the thing is that we can actually start doing something. And I think the bill is something of a start, but it should not be just a bill. It has to be seriously implemented, seriously executed.
Mm,
You need to invest on resources. You need to hire people to monitor, have a team, dedicated team to just look at social media. A lot of content in Malaysia. We are a multi-racial country. Contents come in various form, in
mm-hmm.
multiple languages. Use codes and so on. You need to understand the local lingo, the local, how should I say, encryption, if you would say,
Right.
that is not understood by the US company. So we need a dedicated team to look into this and take and bring social media companies to task to remove them as soon as possible. Of course, the bill talks about 24 hours. I feel it should be much shorter than that.
Mm. Right. So you're talking about these new efforts, right? And investing in making sure that these efforts concerted efforts are done to address this. So one of the things that they are in fact doing right now is that the MCMC is currently running a public consultation on its draft code of conduct for messaging and social media service providers. This all ahead of the regulatory framework that's set to be enforced on January 1st next year. So what are the key input do you think that the MCMC is going to look for at this stage?
Okay, I think as for the feedback from the public and basically all the stakeholders that we have in Malaysia, is that the it if you look at the draft, it mentions about harmful content. What is that? The definition of harmful content is still quite vague, is still quite broad, and I think the public will ask, what do you mean by harmful content? Because it is contextual, right? Some may not consider it harmful, some may consider it harmful. So, what is that definition? The detail is missing. So, they have to be maybe the public will probably look for the clarity and the comprehensiveness of how do you define that, and and also how well this cover potential online risk, and how they they can make sure that they don't overstep into extreme censorship. So
Right.
these are some of the things the public will look at, and also I think how practical, like what you raised now, how practical is it? Is it going to be just an act that just sits there and won't be implemented because of the cost, because of the feasibility, and so on? Because we need to align this code of conduct with what is practically implementable. Of course, things like transparency, accountability, and so on has to be looked at. I think the one of the main key issues that, when I talked about censorship, is that they'll be worried that this code of conduct could be used to suppress freedom of expression. So I think
Right.
that'll be mine of on mind of a lot of people out there.
Okay, so that is definitely one major concern, and I think they do have to play that they have to strike that balance between making sure that there are regulations to ensure that people don't do all these bad things, but at the same time not at the expense of people's rights to freedom of expression. So here's the sort of two-pronged question that I want to throw in for you. So in terms of laws, because obviously these social media platforms, they're giants, they're multinational corporations, giants from the US mostly, if not all. Now, especially with Meta, right? The laws in the US are such that the laws apply differently to them in terms of being a platform and the accountability that they have or the liability that they have over what people say on their platforms, as opposed to say a publisher like the New York Times or like the NST, for example. We are held to the different standards because, again, the laws are, different laws are applicable to us. So do you think that this should continue? That we have different laws for platforms, different laws for publishers, or should we all be held accountable?
Well, this is actually a quite a complex issue, and it's very difficult. There's no simple answer to this.
Right.
But you need to look at from both sides. On one hand, you can say that people will say that there should be a similar standard for measuring accountability, compliance for both mainstream media and social media, right? Because both has strong influence on how on influencing public opinion, and how this information is spread. But the problem with social media, it is not how should I say validated. I think 2 days ago there was a news that India has warned social media platform on consequential actions. After hundreds of hoax, bomb threats, and so on and so forth. This has actually led to real life problem where planes had to be diverted to Canada, and Germany fighter jets were scrambled, and so on. Right? You won't
Right.
find this kind of news in mainstream media, right? And
Mm.
so, from my personal experience, a lot of people used to share content from Facebook, on WhatsApp, and Telegram, and so on.
Yep.
So my first question is that, do you have any reference to the mainstream media? right? If you do not have, then this
Right.
is most probably not trustable. So I think, yeah, there should be some form of accountability for both form of media, but I think it has to be more stringent when it comes to social media because they are unregulated, uncontrolled,
Mm.
unvalidated, and so on. When it comes to mainstream media, we have people like Hazween and so on who actually do research, right?
Right.
Read about it, come to a conclusion, right? And then you publish. Not those kind of thing doesn't work on social media. It used to be a lot of truth and a lot of fake news. Now it's mostly fake news and with
Right.
very little
Yeah.
truth.
Right. And in a somewhat an extension to what you've just answered, talking about fake news, another big problem we have now is with scammers, right? There are plenty on social media and it is costing us billions. So what do you think of, say, vendors? Because obviously social media is a big gateway into that, and people do unfortunately fall for these sort of scams, whether it's phishing sites or, in whatever possible way they can get people to, um, give them money. So what do you think, for example, from this code of conduct, um, would enable the MCMC to do more from in terms of curbing, putting a stop to these scams on FB? I'll give you an example. So, like a well-established retailer, there's lots out there online. Some of them operate purely online. And then when they have their own verified and true apps or portals or websites, right? But sometimes you get all these pages on Facebook promoting deals, promos, discounts from these supposed retailers and offering things that are deals that are a little bit too good to be true. But unfortunately, people still do fall for them. So, what is one thing that the MCMC has to do to step up to make sure that scams like these do not prevail?
Right. Yeah, the problem is that majority of the problem is with the users and the people, right? And you know, with this code of conduct, we could at least reduce some of the fake advertisers and scammers and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I think with this code of conduct, we can basically, or MCMC could enforce verification of advertisers and their claims. So basically, you don't simply throw something over there and expect social media to just publish it. So there has to be some form of verification mechanism. Like for example, if you have banners on the street, you see QR codes or the approval sticker of the local council, right? Meaning that
Yep.
it has been approved by the local council. This is a legit uh, advertisement that you see. Why can't we do that online, right? It's much easier to
Mm.
accomplish like this, right? And this will make it much harder for scammers to even get their foot in the door. I can draw a parallel to this. If you look at the way we access our websites, we have the HTTP and HTTPS, right? And
Mm-hmm.
most cases, when it comes to HTTPS, you need to buy. In most cases, you need to buy the certificate, right? The
Right.
moment you buy a certificate, that means you are now traceable, accountable. If you do anything illegal with your website, we can trace you, we can find you, we can punish you,
Right.
right? So that enforces people not to use the website to do fake advertisements, scamming, and so on and so forth. So in the same manner, we can do the same for fake advertisers and scammers. So they don't have any legit form of validation. We cannot verify. They shouldn't
Yep.
be allowed to be on social media. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, social media, most the biggest revenue stream is from advertisements. So I am not
Mm.
sure whether they will abide to MCMC's requirement
Right.
to operate in Malaysia. So these are some of the issues that can be handled by through this code of conduct.
So it seems, just like how you explained, it seems like it's pretty easy to do. As in, you just have to make sure that verified advertisers must obtain a certificate. And then if they aren't, then, easily the social media platforms can then mark them, flag them. This is a scammer, right? Seems very easy.
Yes.
What is it that you think is holding this back? this effort back? Say, you know, collaboration between the MCMC and the social media giants.
Well, MCMC can put forward their requirement on how to get this done, but social media has to comply, and that's the biggest challenge that we see. Even in US, the social media companies are saying they're doing something, but they're not doing anything.
Mm.
And what do you call this? And as I mentioned earlier, this will disrupt their revenue stream, and they are money making companies. They don't care at the end of the day, right?
Mm.
As I always say that, if there is no product, you are the product, and you are the product for them,
Right.
and for all their gang of what do you call this, bad guys who makes money in the same process. At the same time, the social media platform makes money. So when they're making money, would they want to do anything about it? They just uh, go for deniability. Anything that happens on our
Mm.
platform is not our responsibility. So that's what they're using so far to give an excuse not to do a lot of these things. It is technologically easy to do.
Right. And, you know, as you rightly put, it's all about whether they comply or not. And it seems like they have the upper hand in that. I mean, they have leverage in that
Yeah.
only because they make a lot of money. And so they have the means to, quote unquote, you know, buy influence. For example, I'm sure you're aware of what happened in Brazil when, you know, they demanded for representation, you know, from Twitter, basically. And I think they
Yeah.
managed to kick Twitter out, or Elon Musk out, right? But then it was just
Yeah.
as simple as Elon Musk and Twitter paying, I think it was a penalty or a fine to have Twitter reinstated back in Brazil. I think this sends out a really worrying message that because of the influence that they have, because of their somewhat, you know, too big to fail kind of presence, they're not going to stop anytime soon. It seems like they're bullying and pushing. They're pushing over everyone else. What do you think?
You're exactly right. They are cyber bullies themselves.
There you go.
so, so they can really they have they have the financial mean. They can throw millions or even billions to get their way out. I think at the end of the day, it's the how should I say, the adamance of the government to say you cannot buy your way in. You either follow what we say or you get out. And of course, when I say that, there's an implication, because that's a very controversial statement to make.
Mm.
Abide by our law or get out.
Yep. Yep. It is.
Because the digital economy, a lot of business media. So it's you can't kick out social media, because then there's another problem of impact on livelihood of people.
Mm.
So the government somehow has to decide and do a check and balance. Like if you look at India, they completely banned TikTok. If they could do it, why not us, right?
Mm.
So and then again, there has to be a strike of balance in terms of the access to social media, and also the limitation that we should impose on social media. So I think at the end of the day, the Malaysian government and social media has to come to a compromise at some point. I don't see it any other way, right? We cannot kick them
Mm.
out, and they're not going to fully comply to what we say. So what do we do then, right? So I think when it comes to the code of conduct, one, it is enacted into a law. We will have to see how social media companies would abide to it, and how our government is going to react to it. So that is going to be something that we have to wait and see.
Okay. Something that is definitely concerning, obviously, because of what has just been reported, is, you know, this grooming of underage children. So when it comes to social media, using social media and registering, you know, and opening up an account, by right, children underage, I think it's children under 13 should have parental consent, or at least they should have some kind of monitoring by parents if they wanted to open up an account. That is only an account that the parent signs up for, and not that doesn't belong to them per se. So this, I think, goes without saying. And if something, for example, things like online sexual grooming involving minors does happen, shouldn't there be more robust, intervention from authorities? Because it's one thing to rely on the terms and services of the social media provider, but it's another then to make sure that the country's laws can actually protect our minors.
Again, the problem is that social media is in the cyberspace, and cyberspace is borderless. Like for example, when there was fire in Indonesia, how do you block that from affecting us, right?
Right.
It reaches us anyway, right? So it is a problem that is difficult to be monitored or put into practices, because what we do online is global, right? It's not Malaysian. So if what we
Right.
do is, then yeah, we can do. But since it goes out and we are accessing stuff beyond Malaysia globally, mostly in US, then it creates a problem on how do we protect our minors, right?
Right.
Social media is not also helping them. For example, like a lot of social media streaming, things like Discord server, even Discord servers have been seen to have elements of sexual grooming of young children. So, but the thing is that, again, the social media companies are not doing putting sufficient effort to monitor, to remove content, and so on. And to give another example, like Facebook, there has to be, if you're below 13, you have to have parental control. Fine. If you read the terms and conditions on what parental control is, it says that your parent can limit your usage, your parent can schedule, your parent can do this and that, but they can never see your content. They never can see your post. They can never see your likes. So
Right.
if that's the case, there is no parental control. I cannot monitor what my children is doing. So again, social media companies are not doing, or rather prefer not to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we uh, talk about the cyberbullying case where an adult committed suicide, right? If an adult can suffer or be affected severely of what's happening on social media, imagine of children that are 13 years old. You need to be 18 years old to do a lot of things, to go out freely, uh, to do a lot of things, or to watch movies about that it has violence and so on. Why do we allow children 13 to have access to social media? So they are not ready. So I think these are things that the government or MCMC can dictate at the national level. If any of the parents are found to have children below 13 to be using, at least below 13 to be using social media, there has to be some form of penalty. Because at the end of the day, social media is huge. Government cannot monitor everything. They use code words. They use what do you call this, lingos that others don't understand. In fact, I don't understand a lot of lingos this new generation is using.
Right.
So I think the closest person or people to the children are the parent. So the government could, uh, you know, bring about some form of penalty to parents who do not monitor children, do not protect the children from the menaces of social media.
Okay. You were saying that parents have to be more involved, right? And that you were
They should
talking
be
about
more accountable.
accountable,
I
and that you were
think
talking about proposing, or the government should propose a fine or a penalty for parents who fail to do so in order to protect their children.
correct.
So
Yes.
I think that actually has been talked about a bit, hasn't it? About making sure that parents are aware of their children's activities online. But what exactly
Yeah.
happened to
Well, I
that
think the response
discussion?
was the parents were jumping. They were unhappy that saying that they do not have the time to monitor their children. They are busy with
Right.
work and a lot of other things, and they do not have the time or the effort to monitor. So
Mm,
I think it is our responsibility to make sure our children are safe. We would monitor our children when they are outside in the real world.
mm,
Why aren't we doing that when they are on the social media? So,
mm-hmm.
uh, you know, that's always perplexing to me that, there's always a double standard between the real world and the cyberspace. Because uh, I feel that we are still in the mindset that it will not happen to me. It's only cyberspace.
Mm,
It's not real world. It's not real, and so on. So we have seen many cases where it has impacted real life. The suicide cases and trafficking of children, sexual grooming, and this is just skyrocketing over time. So
right.
when do we try to do something about it until someone we love is impacted? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And part of it is also understanding that, because you said that it's a good point that you raised that, why don't we apply as parents, why don't parents apply the same concern,
Scrutiny.
over
Yeah.
their children, as they would outside in the park, for example, they see a stranger come up, they'll act upon it, right? So it's interesting just because before that you touched on the fact, like, if fires happen in Indonesia, we inevitably we get affected only because, obviously we share the same air, we share the same earth, and we're in the same
Yeah.
region. So
Yes.
cyberspace more or less is like that.
Yes.
Now, there's one that's a challenge in itself, because over time, as technology gets more advanced, is the way people commit crimes and carry out these scams online um, will evolve, and they'll try and get ahead of the authorities, of the rest of us. So, what would number one, what would the online safety bill address to stop this? And what do you think should be in the new law?
Okay. I think so. Cyberspace is always evolving. The online space is always evolving, right? And this is something I always say that in the real world, the criminal is one step ahead of the authority.
Yeah.
In the cyber world, the criminal is many steps ahead of the
Mm,
authority. So
right.
we are doing a catch-up game to cyber criminals, and social media crime is no exception to it. The thing is that we most often look at, how should I say, the way. Okay, let me give you an example. We have seen a lot of cases of data breaches recently, right?
Right. Yeah.
Once that happens, then the relevant organization, oh, we are now taking actions to beef up our security systems and so on. And I always say, what's the point? Your data is already out there. People have access to it. You have reacted late, too late. Damage has been done. So we do not want the bill to be reactive. It has to be proactive. It has to
Yeah.
be prevention. So that is very important. Uh, Most of the time, online safety, security takes a backseat, right? People don't think about it until it happens, right? When it happens, it's too late. So the act or the bill has to make sure prevention is put in place, not mitigation, not detection, not an afterthought. So this also involves how you build, how social media build a system. Security and privacy has to be part of the uh, how the system is built. It has to be part of the design. So a lot of online uh, world that Malaysians get into has to think about security and privacy as first thing before you do anything, right? Because when you get into the car, the first thing you should do is wear the seatbelt, right? And the act should, or the bill should make sure there's a seatbelt for all Malaysian users when they go into social media.
Okay. And step number one would be? Step number one.
Come again?
Step number one would be?
For
putting on that seatbelt.
uh-huh.
Step
So
number
step
one would
one
be?
basically.
Okay, so in terms of where your sort of not responsibility, but I guess your presence as the user ends and where the authorities step in, where is that line? That's what I think, and that's what
Okay.
I'm trying to ask. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So basically, there's two parts to it. There's three parts to it: the
Okay.
user, the service provider, the social media, and the authority, the government, PDRM, MCMC, and so on. Uh, I think the social media must ensure that the platform is safe, number one. Number two, the government must ensure they are uh, local means for Malaysians to be able to understand, uh, have tools, locally built tools to check. Like, for example, we have things like sebenarnya.my to check whether something is misinformation, disinformation, or fake news. We can easily do that for social media. So I think our government should be able to build a centralized system, because we have authorities, and these authorities are working independently, siloed, and not talking too much with each other. There is no data sharing in place yet. So I think if we can build a national social media monitoring platform, that would be fantastic. Where we bring all the authorities and even end users, stakeholders, you can react immediately to anything that we can see. When NST found the child sexual grooming site on social media, right? How many of them know, right? Until you break it on the news, right, to the public. So if this can be done, I think we can not uh, remove, but significantly reduce the threats online.
This idea that you speak of, I think I remember speaking to YB Gobind Singh recently, our digital minister, and he did, say something briefly about this because in by late November, or at least by December this year, the data sharing bill will be tabled in Parliament as well. After this online safety bill gets its day in Parliament, and I think somewhat you're echoing the same mechanism here by our digital minister. So this is a good step then forwards, right? This is looking
Yes.
positive.
It looks positive, but I would also like to see that it is implemented and see success stories, right? Most often we see a lot of initiatives and they do not grow, they do not progress. After 1 or 2 years, a lot of this effort dies off. So it should not be the case when it comes to the livelihood and the safety of people. It should be built upon fixed issues. Of course, there's going to be a lot of issues, fixed issues, and keep on building upon it, because this is very, very important when it comes to data sharing, information sharing, and being responsive as real time as possible. And a lot of things can be thwarted even before the damage is done.
Right. And just to play devil's advocate here, because we've had, because you talked about how data breach is something quite rife. It's happened a lot of times. Another concern, I think, especially with people who might question this data sharing bill, is what are the possibilities of then more information, more data being leaked? Because now we've got this data sharing mechanism, in place. How do you think the government should respond to these concerns, allay these concerns, and say, hey, your data is safe with us. We're not going to have any data breaches, not at least, at this scale, because if it does happen, it's gonna be huge. So what should the government do to make sure that everyone's, rest assured?
Okay, I think these are similar questions have been asked a few times when data breaches happen, and also concerned with Padu and so on, because it holds a lot of personal information. I believe that nobody can guarantee a 100% secure and unbreachable system. It is almost impossible. Uh, so the thing is that the government should do the due diligence of making sure that the system that when they build such data sharing platform, they have considered that how you store your data is secure, how the data is used is private. Like you can encrypt. Most of the time, when data breaches happen, all the data is not encrypted. It is visible. So one thing they could do is when you store itself, encrypt it, right? Or we call it hashing. And and when criminals get access to the data, they only see garbage. So now these are some examples what government could do to protect. At least even when data breaches happen, the data is not usable. So I think that is something that can be done, and make sure that when you build something, make sure that you don't think about just building and deploying. Make sure it's built, tested. Make sure if issues is found, fix it.
Right.
Spend some time before you actually release it, because everybody's rushing to get things out, and that's why you see all these data breaches happening, because there's no due diligence is done to make sure that you have done the necessary steps. Get a third party pen test, do a pen test, find out if there's any vulnerability, potential data breach, and then fix those and release it. Not guaranteeing that it will be 100% secure, but it will make it difficult for potential hackers to break in and breach the data from the system. So I think this is very important that the government should do when they build critical systems that deals with personal data of Malaysians, especially. They have to ensure that uh, all the systems that are built should be built with security and privacy in mind, and they have to make sure it is tested and 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 hire pen testers or hackers. What we call white hat hackers, the good guys, right? Hire them, right? Get them to break into the system, right? You're going to find a lot of vulnerabilities, loopholes,
Yep.
bugs. Fix them, and then and make sure there's no data breaches are going to happen. But you cannot guarantee it, right? So that would be a fallacy to guarantee that our system is 100% secure. So and there's no data. You have done the due diligence, you have done all the standard requirements. The lack of trust in systems that they build. So I mean, everybody's using online system nowadays. All right, everybody's using it. They do not know whether it is secure or not, but they still use it, right? So in similar fashion, they will still use any system that is built by the government, but to create the environment of trust, if the government can lay out what they have done to ensure the data is secure and the system is built securely, that will tremendously increase the trust that people have in systems built by government.
So just to round up the discussion, we're getting to the end here. Basically, it has to go through a stress test, and the stress test must prove successful. Otherwise, it's setting up for a failure, right?
Correct. So at the end of the day, when we, when car manufacturers, right, build their car, right, the first thing they do is get the car out on a test circuit, right, and make sure the car works fine, and so on and so forth. But they cannot detect any other anomalies or issues. The car, it works. We have tested it. We have put it through tests. It works. But and they share that detail, saying that okay, we have built the car. We have tested it. We had correct some kinks here and there. I think it is road savvy now. So, but whether it will be fully road savvy or not, it is until it is on the road. Same with the system that we have, right? If you can do that, then I think we're fine.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Professor. again for your time on Beyond the Headlines. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And obviously, with Deepavali coming up, Deepavali Vatakal,
Thank you for having me.
you're celebrating, right?
Nandri, Nandri. Thank you very
So,
much.
yeah,
Happy
I
holidays
hope
to you
you,
too.
hope you have a nice holiday with friends and family. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Take care, Hazween. Bye
All
bye.
right, bye. That's all for this week. I'm Hazween Hassan, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to wish our Hindu viewers and everyone else who's celebrating a happy Deepavali. May the festival of lights bring us victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and knowledge over ignorance. Deepavali Vatakal. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.